Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today we are going to cover something that I think needs a lot more attention, and that is strength training for runners. I'm going to run through the 8 most essential exercises, in my opinion, that are out there for runners to implement to make them more resilient to injury, to improve their efficiency, to improve their stride, and just to make them a bit of a more robust overall athlete. If you do enjoy this video, please do give it a like and make sure that you've subscribed below. I am looking to do more informative videos as the year goes on, as I think it's very important that we all equip ourselves with the necessary tools to be injury-free and programming in the right direction so that we can make as much progress as possible. As a runner, over the past 3 years, I've been largely injury-free, and I put that down to balancing strength work alongside my endurance work. Whatever stage of your running journey you're at, whether you're a complete beginner or very advanced, it's really important to implement some form of strength and conditioning. As with everything, technique with these exercises is paramount, so please do make sure you start at the level that's relevant to you and work your way up until you are practicing the movements efficiently. I'll be going through each individual exercise and trying to give you some variations or ways that you can progress towards it as we go. But other than that, let's get straight into it. Number 1, in my opinion, is the king of all exercises, runner or otherwise, and that is the squat.
Squatting is an excellent test of our overall mobility and, more importantly, our dorsiflexion, which is the range of movement that we have in our ankles, something very important as a runner. As you can see here, mine actually needs a little bit of work as my lower back is rounding in the bottom position. I use Olympic weightlifting shoes to combat this, but if you don't have access to them, you can simply stick a book, a ramp or some sort of weight plate underneath your heel to give you some added range of motion. Here is one of the progressions that you can implement once you have developed your squat. This is the dumbbell goblet squat and simply involves you holding a dumbbell out in front of you to add some resistance. The key thing to remember when squatting is that your knees should be tracking out over your toes, your heel should be screwed into the floor, and your weight should be on your mid-foot. Other than that, just remember to breathe at the top of each rep and to brace your core. Once you've mastered the skill, you can move on to more advanced movements like the barbell back squat, which simply involves putting a barbell on your traps, breaking at the hips before you break at the knees, and then dropping down into the bottom position. A movement that you can develop over time and improve your strength as it goes.
Number 2, again, one of my absolute favourites for runners or anyone else, is the lunge or variations of.
There are multiple variations and so many ways in which we can progress with lunges, which is fantastic for a long-term development because it means we can always change things up. The best thing about them is that in many ways they mimic a running stride, which means that we're building strength in a relevant movement pattern. Here we have the reverse lunge, which is a great place to start, and here we have a static version of the lift, which is a dumbbell split squat. The key thing to remember here is that our center of gravity is just below our torso and that we're working through that plane of motion. These exercises can be substituted with a barbell if you'd rather, but that will add a little bit more core stability to consider. Here is a Bulgarian split squat, which is one of the more complicated variations. Will again require a bit more core stability, but is a great thing to work up to. All these movements are working your glutes, hamstrings and quads, and as I say, are mimicking a running stride, which is fantastic. Final variation to consider is a plyometric version, which is basically adding some impact to a resistance movement as a way of adding a little bit more volume at the end of your session.
There's a bit of a misconception in endurance training that I'm a runner, I'm a cyclist, why would I do strength work? I'm not a bodybuilder, I'm not a strength athlete. However, there are so many benefits from implementing low volume, higher intensity strength work. A lot of people assume that when you're training for endurance that you should do low weight, higher reps because that mimics the action of endurance, when in reality you should actually be focusing on higher intensity, lower reps, heavier weight, because that is where the benefits really lie in overall strength, the neuromuscular benefits that are there, and developing more power behind each and every stride or pedal stroke, whatever it might be, moving forwards. We all have a maximum amount of adaptive energy that we can tap into each and every week to develop forwards as athletes, so it's really important to balance our training programs so that we can form as much of a well-rounded approach as possible. That is what's going to improve us in the long term. It's going to mean that we are injured less of the time. Number 3, probably the most traditional upper body exercise and one that we've known about since we were all at a very young age, is the press up.
Upper body training is just as important for runners as lower body training is, as it helps us maintain consistent technique over a longer period of time. If you can't start with full press ups, then you can start on your knees, which is basically the same movement just with a little less resistance, or if that's too challenging, you can start with an incline press up, which again is just taking some resistance away from the movement. If you are comfortable with press-ups and have built up some progression over time, then you can add in a pause as a variation, as you can see here. Or even if you've worked up to being able to move bigger weights, you can add some weights to your press-ups. There's many ways in which you can progress, but it's very important to remember to train your upper body as well.
Number 4, it's key when doing any pressing movements that you should balance them with any pulling movements so not to cause any shoulder imbalances or any rounding or hunching of your upper back. So number 4 is some form of horizontal row.
Having conditioned scapula is very important as a runner, as it will help us keep an upright position when we are fatigued. And when we're doing any pressing movements, it's important to balance them out with pulling movements. So some form of horizontal row, whether it's with dumbbells, barbells, or a machine, is essential as well. As you can see here, pull your lats into your back pockets and squeeze the dumbbell at the top position to retract your scapula.
Number 5, as it's really important to maintain a strong and stable core to keep our technique solid over a longer period of time, we have the leg raise.
There are millions of ways online in which we can train our core. This is just one of my favourite movements as it really emphasises control. If you can start with some support behind you, raising your legs to the ceiling, fantastic. If not, you can start with some knee raises and build up from there. Ultimately, once you've mastered these two movements on the floor, you can take it to a bar with some knee raises whilst hanging. And then once you've built up some progression there, you can ultimately work towards leg raises whilst hanging too, but hopefully with a bit more height than I have on my bar here.
Number 6 is the glute bridge and the many variations of it that we can implement.
A fantastic exercise to really contract your glutes and your hamstrings and feel where your weaknesses are. These are an essential part of your running stride, so working through these movement patterns is critical. You can start with both feet on the floor, and then you can develop as time goes on, raising one foot over the other, ultimately building up towards adding weight, which can be done with a dumbbell or a barbell. The key movement is the same. It is a simple hip hinge, squeezing your glutes and your hamstrings as you go into the top position.
Number 7 is the single leg dumbbell deadlift.
Standard deadlifts are a wonderful exercise, but they are ultimately very, very demanding on our bodies, and as a runner we want to save most of our adaptive energy for running itself. So a really good way to mimic the movement and yield a lot of the returns that you get from a standard deadlift is by making it a unilateral movement and emphasizing one leg over the other at a time. As you can see here, you can ultimately progress to doing it with one leg raised off the floor, but it all just comes down to a matter of progressing over time.
Number 8 is the Z press, named after the strongman Big Z, and it is above and beyond the most skillful and complicated of the exercise, but I will give you the progressions to be able to work up towards it. It's fantastic for scapular strength and core stability, and if you can work up to this, you will be in a much, much better place than you were before you started.
Challenging but incredibly functional movement, one that hammers your core, improves your pressing strength and works your scapula all at the same time. The best place to start to work towards this is with a standing dumbbell press so that you can learn to control your range of motion, control your scapula and push your head through at the top. As you can see here, once you've mastered the skill of the movement, you can take a seat on a bench to remove a little bit more stability and mimic being on the floor. Then you can reduce the weight a little bit and try a Z press in the correct position. Best of luck.
So those are my top 8 strength exercises for runners at whatever level of running you're at. Obviously some are a little bit more difficult and technically proficient than others, but something to look forward to, something to work towards, and something to progress towards week by week so that you can ultimately be a more robust runner. If you do have any more questions on any of the exercises, or would like a bit more in-depth insight onto how to set up for them, if you do have any more questions on any of the specific exercises, how you need to set up for them, etc., please do just comment down below. Again, thank you very much for watching. If you do have any more suggestions for some informative content you'd like to see, please do put it in the comments down below. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please make sure that you have liked and subscribed. See you soon.